I ceased to exist on a Tuesday, not the poetic fade into the sunset kind of ceasing, I mean legally, bureaucratically, socially scrubbed from the grid. It was the day I signed my new name for the first time in front of a notary, her stamp hovering over a birth certificate that still smelled like fresh toner. To everyone who used to know me, I'd already vanished months earlier when I made one phone call that lit my whole childhood on fire. This isn't a story about running away. It's about calculated erasure. I triggered a state investigation against my own parents, then spent 2 years systematically dismantling every legal tie to them, until I didn't share their name, their address, or their history. I became a ghost because staying visible meant staying dead. Here's exactly how it happened. My father's voice had a particular pitch when he was about to snap, a low, almost friendly rumble, like a warning growl from a dog that hasn't decided to bite yet. That night, standing in our pristine kitchen, the marble island between us like a frozen lake, I heard it again. "You're making a federal case out of a C-, Elena. What do you want me to do, throw you a parade for mediocrity?" I was 17, my name was Elena Vance. I had the grades I had because I was surviving, not thriving, but he'd spent years training me not to argue back. My mother leaned against the pantry door, arms folded. She didn't say a word. She'd learned that silence was the safest shape to hold. "I'll do better," I said, monotone. The correct script. He stepped closer. I saw the shift in his jaw. "Look at me when I'm talking to you." I looked. His eyes were flat, the way they got before the belt, before the back of his hand. I'd cataloged these micro-expressions for years, a survival language only I spoke. That's what invisible abuse looks like. It's not always bruises. It's your mother watching you get berated until you dissociate and then whispering, "Why do you provoke him?" afterward, as if your existence were the original sin. The physical part had escalated slowly. A shove into a doorframe here, a wrestling hold that left marks there. By 16, I was hiding a secret phone, an old burner I'd bought with babysitting cash, tucked inside a hollowed-out textbook. I'd been recording audio for 6 months, not because I planned to call anyone. At first, I just needed proof that I wasn't crazy. The gaslighting was so thorough, I genuinely believed I might be the monster. The final straw wasn't a beating, though there was one. It was the moment I realized they'd never let me leave. I'd secretly applied to a college 3 states away, got accepted. I made the mistake of leaving the envelope in my backpack, and my mother found it while tidying up. Within hours, my father had called the admissions office, impersonating me, and declined the offer. He told me that night. No yelling, almost serene. "You're not capable of being on your own, Elena. You'll stay here, do community college, and learn some gratitude. If you try to leave, I will find you, and I will make sure everyone knows what a liar you are." Then he broke my burner phone. Found it because I'd gotten careless. He didn't just snap it, he crushed it under his boot on the kitchen floor while my mother watched. Then he grabbed my wrist so hard I heard something pop. That was 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday. I waited until dawn, heart pounding so loud I thought it would give me away, and I remembered an old cloud-synced voice memo. A recording of him 3 weeks prior, screaming that he'd erase me from this family if I ever talked to a counselor again. It was still there on the cloud server, accessible from my school Chromebook. I had evidence. At 8:15 a.m., while they were at work, I used the landline to call Child Protective Services. The intake call is etched into my bones. A calm woman asked, "What is your emergency?" And I said, "I'm 17. My parents are abusive. I have proof. I need someone to come today before they hurt me again." She asked for my address. I gave it. She asked if I was safe right now. I said, "No, but if you don't hurry, I won't be." That call triggered an irreversible chain. I hung up, packed a single backpack with essentials, documents, the cloud login scribbled on paper, underwear, a photo of my grandmother who died when I was 10, the only adult who ever looked at me without disappointment, and I sat on the front steps to wait. I didn't cry. I had passed beyond tears into something more mechanical. I was already beginning to dismantle my life. 2 police cruisers and a CPS caseworker arrived within 40 minutes. The moment they saw my swollen wrist and heard the recording on my caseworker's laptop, my father being pulled from his office in handcuffs, became inevitable. My mother stood on the lawn, lips white, and screamed at me, "You've destroyed us, you ungrateful, lying—" A female officer stepped between us. "Ma'am, step back." I was taken to a temporary shelter that night. The next morning, a guardian ad litem was appointed. Lila, A sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who smelled like spearmint gum, sat with me in a fluorescent conference room and laid out the reality. You triggered a mandatory investigation. Because of the medical evidence and the recording, the state is filing a dependency petition. Your father's facing criminal charges. Your mother's being evaluated. Do you understand what that means? I nodded, but I didn't truly understand the machinery I'd put into motion. The legal system doesn't work fast, but it can be thorough. Each interview peeled back layers I'd plastered over for years. I told them about the isolation, the financial control, the times I wasn't allowed to see a doctor. The advocate explained a crucial loophole. If the abuse was severe enough and if I was close to majority, a judge could terminate parental rights without a lengthy reunification plan, especially if I refused contact and the parents were deemed a continuing threat. At 17 and a half, my voice carried more weight than a younger child's. The court hearings were surreal. I sat across from my parents in a wood-paneled room, a victim advocate by my side, while they glared at me with a hatred so pure it could curdle milk. My father's lawyer tried to paint me as a rebellious teen. My mother cried that I was mentally unstable. But the recording, sank them. They didn't know about it until the state's attorney played it in the judge's chambers. I didn't have to be there. I just imagined their faces twisting when they heard my father growl, "I'll erase you." That was the same language he'd used when he smashed my phone. The judge terminated their rights 6 months later, citing aggravated circumstances. I became a ward of the state. For the first time in my life, no adult could legally call me theirs. It was horrifying and liberating in equal measure. I spent my last months before 18 in a group home, which was no paradise but was physically safe, and I spent every spare hour planning the final severance. I told no one my real plans. I learned to smile just enough to be forgettable. I scrubbed my social media, every tagged photo, every old account, every loose thread. I deleted the Elena Vance that existed online. I stopped answering to my name internally. The day I turned 18, I didn't celebrate. I went to the county courthouse with a pro bono legal advocate I'd met through a domestic violence nonprofit. I filed a petition for a legal name change. Simultaneously, I applied for a new social security number under the SSA's Victim Protection Guidelines, documentation of severe abuse, a police report, a letter from the advocate detailing ongoing safety risks. It's a grueling, paper-intensive process that exists for people who can prove that their abusers would use their SSN to track them. I qualified. The court hearing for the name change was quiet. No one contested it. My parents didn't even know it was happening. The judge, a woman with tired eyes and a kind mouth, asked if I understood that changing my name wouldn't erase my past, but could help protect my future. I said I understood. She stamped the order. I walked out of that courthouse with a certified copy and, for administrative purposes, ceased to be Elena Vance. I chose a name that meant nothing to anyone but me, Mara Kellen. Mara, a name I'd once read in a book and loved for its simplicity. Kellen, after my grandmother's maiden name, a tiny private anchor. The social security card took 2 agonizing months. During that time, I couch surfed at a safe house, built no attachments, and used only cash. When the card arrived with my new number, I sat on the floor and stared at it for an hour. Then I went to the Vital Records office and ordered my new birth certificate. The original, sealed by court order. The new one listed my new name and a blank field for parents. I don't know how to describe the sensation of holding legal proof that I had no legal past. It felt like stepping into zero gravity, terrifying, but I was suddenly weightless. I picked a city I'd never visited, one with a strong tenant rights culture and no family ties within 1,000 miles. Portland, Oregon. I bought a Greyhound ticket with cash. I left on a Tuesday, and to everyone who'd ever known Elena, that's the day I ceased to exist. The first year was a long, muffled scream. I rented a room in a house with 3 strangers from a Craigslist ad, paying a deposit in physical bills. I didn't have a credit score, no history, no cosigner, no parent to lean on. I worked 2 jobs, a breakfast shift at a diner, and weekend hours at a thrift shop. I got a secured credit card with a $200 deposit and used it only for bus passes, paying it off obsessively just to birth a FICO score from nothing. The financial system isn't built for ghosts. One landlord asked for a previous address and I froze. I gave the group home's address, praying he wouldn't dig. Worse was the isolation. New coworkers asked simple questions. Where are you from? What do your parents do? Got any siblings? I learned to craft a vague, boring story. I grew up in the Midwest, my parents passed away, no family. The lie felt like swallowing a fishbone every time, but it shut down follow-ups. You can't bond with people over shared childhood memories when your childhood memories are a minefield. One night, a new friend, a sweet, loud barista named Taylor, showed me a funny photo of her mom from the 90s and said, "I bet your mom had the same ridiculous bangs." I laughed because it was the expected thing, then excused myself to the bathroom and hyperventilated until my lips went numb. My mother's face, her disappointed silence, the way she chose him over me again and again, it all slammed back like a wave. I was grieving people who were still alive, people who would probably hunt me if they had the resources. That grief had no ritual, no funeral, no closure. I kept waiting for a private investigator to knock on my door. My father had always bragged about knowing people, about finding anyone. So I lived in a constant, low-grade alert. I rotated the deadbolt twice. I never posted a clear face photo online. I became a fast study in operational security. By 2025, I had assembled something resembling a normal life, though I'd stopped defining normal by other people's standards. I'd built a chosen family piece by piece. Taylor, who after that awkward moment I slowly let in on a sanitized version of my story. An older neighbor, Mr. Chen, who taught me to garden and never asked intrusive questions. A small support group for survivors of family trauma that met in a church basement, where I didn't have to explain why I flinched at sudden movements. Technology became my ally. I used a VPN religiously, paid for a data removal service to scrub my new name from people's search sites, and kept my social media presence locked down with aliases that had no identifiable ties. In 2026, privacy protocols had evolved enough that I could use encrypted messaging apps with disappearing messages for any sensitive communication. I maintained a private P.O. box, never gave out my home address, and held my lease under a single-member LLC, a legal trick my advocate taught me to obscure my name from public property records. It wasn't paranoia, it was the price of freedom. Trust, when it came, felt radical. A year ago, I met someone, a quiet, patient software developer named Jess. On our third date, they asked, "What's your biggest fear?" And I almost gave the canned answer about spiders. Instead, I took a breath and said, "Being found by the people who raised me." I didn't elaborate. Jess didn't push. They just nodded and said, "Then I'll make sure we always lock the doors." Months later, I told them the whole truth. They held my hand and didn't flinch. That moment, choosing to be known, on my terms, felt more like family than any blood tie ever had. People ask if I regret it, if I miss my parents, if I feel guilty. The answer is complicated and not at all. I miss the parents I should have had. I don't miss the ones I got. The guilt shows up on random Tuesdays, a familiar ache. But guilt is a manageable price for safety. The old me, Elena, was a hostage. Mara is free. My birth certificate still says father unknown, mother unknown in the digital file. When I look at it now, I don't see loss. I see the blank space where I get to write my own story. Being nameless isn't emptiness. It's the ultimate self-care. It's the quiet, radical act of saying, and that's the only inheritance I'll ever need.